Nordic countries top the world happiness rankings every year. Researchers fly in, interview people, measure life satisfaction across thousands of respondents, and confirm it. Then they try to explain it, and the explanations never quite land, because they describe conditions rather than feelings. They say high trust, strong welfare state, work-life balance, social cohesion, and all of that is true, and none of it tells you what the feeling is. This video is not about the conditions. It is about what the feeling actually is from the inside, and why it is so different from what most people picture when they hear the word happy. Before we continue, if you'd consider subscribing, it only takes a few seconds and helps the channel out a lot. Now let's get into it. Start with what Nordic happiness is not, because the gap between what most people imagine and what it actually is happens to be the most important thing about it. It is not excitement. It is not the peak emotional state of a very good day. It is not the feeling of something wonderful having just happened, or something wonderful being about to happen. Nordic happiness does not tend to express itself in superlatives, or in the performed enthusiasm that in some cultures functions as a social currency. A Nordic person describing a good life does not typically reach for words that indicate intensity. They reach for words that indicate sufficiency, enough, good, fine in the fullest sense of the word, where fine means complete, rather than merely acceptable. The Danish word lykke, which is the closest equivalent to happiness in the Nordic languages, carries specific connotations that the English word does not. It is closer to contentment than to joy, closer to being at peace with the life you are living than to feeling good about it in a given moment. The researcher Meik Wiking, who has spent a career studying Nordic happiness at the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen, describes it as the experience of a life that fits. Not a life that thrills or impresses or produces constant positive emotion, but a life that fits the person living it, in the way a well-made garment fits, where you stop noticing it is there because it is simply right. What does this actually feel like in a day? The texture of it is easier to describe negatively, as an absence, than positively, as a presence. It is the absence of dread in the morning, the specific relief of waking up without immediately loading the day's anxieties onto the first conscious moments. It is the absence of the background monitoring that most people run continuously. How is this going? Am I doing enough? What do other people think? Is this the right life? It is the absence of the waiting, the persistent sense that the real life begins after the current situation resolves, after the thing changes, after something different arrives. What remains when those specific forms of mental occupation are not present is not ecstasy. It is something considerably quieter than ecstasy and considerably more available. It is simply being in the life you are in without the specific friction of wishing it were otherwise. The research on where this state comes from consistently points away from wealth as the primary variable. Nordic countries are prosperous, but they are not the wealthiest countries on earth. And the happiness research has found that above a certain income threshold, additional wealth adds very little to life satisfaction. What it points toward instead is a cluster of conditions that address the specific anxieties that most reliably undermine contentment. The welfare state that removes the financial catastrophe scenarios that in many countries represent a real background threat. The institutional trust that means you move through systems that are working for you rather than against you. The social connection that is deep rather than wide, built slowly and maintained without the specific performance that approval-seeking social cultures require. The work culture that ends when it ends, leaving the hours that belong to the person free to actually belong to them. None of these conditions produce happiness directly. What they do is remove the specific impediments to a contentment that, in their absence, the person is capable of arriving at on their own. The Nordic welfare state is not a happiness machine. It is a system that has been arranged to stop doing the specific things that make happiness difficult to access. The difference sounds subtle and is enormous. A person who is not afraid of medical bankruptcy, not anxious about retirement, not trapped in a working day that consumes the hours that personal life requires, not navigating institutions that might be working against them, is a person who has been given the structural conditions in which their own natural capacity for contentment can actually operate. Nordic happiness is not produced by Nordic society. It is permitted by it. The honest complication is that Nordic countries have depression, loneliness, and the specific darkness that long winters produce in a portion of every population. The happiness rankings describe a statistical average across millions of people, not a universal experience. And the specific pressures of modern life, the smartphone, the global work culture that follows people home, the housing costs in major Nordic cities, are applying pressure to the contentment that Nordic society has historically protected, in the same direction and with similar effects to everywhere else. The feeling described in this video is real and is measurable, and is more widely distributed in Nordic countries than elsewhere. It is not universal, and it is not guaranteed by geography. What it is, for the people who have it, is the thing that the happiness researchers keep trying to measure, and that the happiness industry keeps trying to sell. Not a technique, not a practice, not something achieved through effort or maintained through discipline. Simply the specific quality of a daily life in which the structural conditions have been arranged to stop producing the specific feelings that make living feel like a problem, to be managed, rather than a thing to be inhabited. The Danes call it lykke. The researchers call it life satisfaction. From the inside, it does not have a name. It is simply what life feels like when it fits. All the sources and data referenced in this video are listed in the description below. Sit with that for a moment. I'll see you in the next one.